This is no place for you. Prewen has several patrols roaming the area.
They do not pursue me.
But they're looking for vampires, and they're most efficient.
They'll not relent until the killer has been identified.
I have a common objective, but I require...
Shh. I think someone is eavesdropping.
Are you certain? You might as well come in, whoever you are.
Slowly, vampire. Who are you?
I mean you no harm.
Saith the vampire. Present yourself.
I need a word. Would anyone?
Well, that's something I can do for you.
Hello and welcome to another episode of LGR Play. As always, I'm your host Mark Hamer, and joining me today, flying in through the open window, fresh from doing his dark bidding, it's Creature of the Night and one half of the Codec Moments podcast, Matt Holt. Good evening, Matt.
Good evening. You know what? That's the best introduction I think I've ever had. I love it.
So, I've got you on the show to talk about a perfect example of the type of game that I really love, which is the tries so hard to do something interesting but doesn't quite make it. Solid 7 out of 10 video game. Specifically, Dontnod Entertainment's recent release. I'm going to call it Vampyr.
You know what? It is a tough one, isn't it? Because I think it's Vampyr as well, but I just keep calling it Vampire.
Okay. Yeah, Vampyr.
Let's go with Vampyr for this.
I'll go with Vampyr.
Yeah.
Spelt Vampyr for anyone who hasn't seen it written down. So Dontnod Entertainment are kind of specialists in this area of like trying to do something really interesting and almost but not quite making it. You know, excelling in certain areas and falling rather short in other areas.
Yeah, they have some belting ideas.
Yes.
And they have to have gameplay mechanics that sell you the game. You're bought into it after your probably first half an hour or so, but you get to the end and you go, oh, you could have just... It's that kind of feeling.
Yeah, that's my... right from... So Dontnod Entertainment, they've only been around for 10 years. This was their 10-year anniversary this year. I first became aware of them when Remember Me came out, and I adore that game. Despite its many problems, it's set in this fantastic cyberpunk future of Neo Paris. It does some interesting things with the combat, but it's a little bit wonky. There's the whole memory manipulation aspect of the game. There's that incredible soundtrack. But it's incredibly linear. The interesting aspects of the game are massively underused. Yeah. The combat gets incredibly frustrating. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the tale with Dontnod Entertainment games.
It is, really. Isn't it? That was my first experience of them as well. And I think I actually saw the memory remixing elements at E3.
Yeah.
Or some footage, and I've gone, that's for me. I bought it on release. I thought it looked stunning. I love the realisation of the world. Yep. It was fantastic, but you're right on the combat. I think that's what really let it down, other than you only did like 3 memory remixes over the course of a 12 or 15 hour game. It was so underused, but the combat, a really obtuse combat system with awful combos that were just no use. And you're stuck with the same 4-button punches for your entire time. Yeah,
and I found it frustrating that they'd come up with this incredible art style of taking the old architecture of Paris and then putting cyberpunk elements on top of it. And the world looked so incredible, and it's just so frustrating that you couldn't ever explore it because you were just funneled down a path. But yeah. Well, we're not going to into too much detail about that game. That's not what we're here to talk about. Dontnod are also, of course, behind the Life of Strange series. After Remember Me came out, they had financial problems because that game was a complete flop.
Yeah.
Capcom walked away from them and refused to work with them anymore. Square Enix stepped in and decided to publish Life is Strange, which is there's 3 of them now. There's Life is Strange, Before the Storm. I don't think Dontnod have done that one. I think that was someone else.
Yeah, did they outsource it?
I think so, yeah. But they're doing Life is Strange 2, and they did The Awesome Adventures of Captain Spirit, which is one that's come out this year, I think, or coming out for free.
Did it come out yesterday?
It might have.
Sure.
Another game came out yesterday that kind of caught my attention, but we'll talk about that another time.
Fair enough. No, I think I saw somebody photo downloading it on Twitter, so I think it came out yesterday. If not, it might well be out by the time this is live.
Yeah, definitely. And those games are more like a Telltale style, narrative-driven point-and-click adventure game, or a modern take on the point-and-click adventure game. Still fall short in many areas, but still somehow manage to do it better than Telltale, considering that's all Telltale does. But yeah, anyway. So, Vampyr. This one's was floating around in the ether for a good while. Didn't know when it was going to come out, and then suddenly they just dropped this release date that was going to be coming out. When was it? May? Did it come out in the end?
It was the beginning of June. Very beginning of June. And it was a bit of a mystery, wasn't it? Because you're right. For about 2 to 3 years, we've been seeing this really interesting footage and thinking, this has got to be a long way off. And then there was only about 2 or 3 months' notice for the release date. Yeah. Which is unusual for most games. Kind
of came out of nowhere and didn't get anywhere near as much media attention and hype as you would assume for something coming out like that, especially during the summer games drought. It's an interesting game. The first thing I'll say is it could have probably done with another couple of months in the oven.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree on that. And some of its elements of polish and just tweaks of getting the engine doing everything. Don't get me wrong, it's not a bad engine, but there's a bit of popping and with fog and lighting and textures, so it could have been tweaked on that. But I think it needed a bit of pacing and story. Not story changing, because I thought the story was okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've only had this one for a couple of weeks, and I've had quite a lot of other games on the go at the same time, so I've only managed to put in about 6 or 7 hours. It's not massively long.
No, and that's probably one of the reasons when I say it needed some story and pacing tweaking, is because it isn't as long as you're almost led to believe when you start it off, with the way it opens things up for you and reveals the mechanics. It does it really nicely. It does that very well. In drip feeding you the bits and pieces that you can work on, because it is an RPG. There are those elements in there for upgrading, and it gives them a decent rate. But once it's all available to you, the game seems to pick up a bit of pace and almost rushes you through, and then it pauses and chucks in a massive long chapter, and then has really short ones. It's quite... You feel like you get to the end without expecting it.
Oh, so the Final Fantasy 15 style.
It could. I haven't played that, but it could well be that. You rocket through the first ones. You start doing the side missions or the investigations. You're doing a bit of exploration, everything you would in this style of game, and then you get back on the story path. And you think, I'll just keep going. Then all of a sudden you're thinking, what? End game already?
So for those who don't know much about it, probably set it up. So it's an adventure RPG action game. The story premise is really interesting. It's set in London in 1918, during the middle of right at the end of the First World War, in the middle of a Spanish flu epidemic. So London is a bit of a mess. And you play Dr. Jonathan Reed, a world-renowned surgeon and a pioneer of blood transfusion techniques, who's returning from the front to visit his sick mother when he gets bitten and turned by a vampire. And the first thing that happens is he wakes up in a pile of dead bodies and, unable to control his thirst, kills his own sister. So very happy start to the game.
It is, isn't it?
And then basically you're just trying to discover, what's going on, who turned you, but then also you're a doctor and you feel, Jonathan feels like he has responsibilities to care for the people of London in the middle of this horrific epidemic. And so the whole game is this kind of moral dilemma of balancing Jonathan's need to feed with his Hippocratic oath of do no harm.
Yes, that was the selling point for me.
Yeah.
Everything I heard about it was that dichotomy and how you would manage that, and having that choice of healing the people you come across or feeding from them. And it does present that. I think it does present that very well. The way it does it, it was unexpected. I didn't think it would be the major NPC interaction that you actually get. You can't. No. You genuinely don't just walk up to people and decide to eat, decide to feed on them or embrace them, as it calls it. You have to go through dialogue trees. You have to be the right level. You have to ensure no one else is around. The
game forces you to get to know people before you have the chance to feed on them.
Yeah, and it gives you do have that very clear option of finding out what kind of bonus you're going to get from them, because they give you XP for feeding. Yeah, the healthier they are, the more XP you get. So you can decide whether you're going to chow down straight away, or do you actually want to heal them and come back later. Take more XP for it.
It's like the whole thing that was in Dishonored, where going through the game by killing people made the game a lot easier in terms of getting from point A to point B, but the world got more messed up and more dark and harder to manage as the game went on because of your actions. And I understand that the more people you feed on in Vampyr, the less healthy the sections of London become, and the more dangerous they become.
Yes. So you get bigger and nastier beasts in the linking sections, because it's I want to call it a semi-open world, because there is actually quite a bit of loading and transitioning between certain areas. But you have almost an exploration area where you're free to walk around, talk to people, check everything out, and then linking sections, which are almost fancy corridors filled with the enemies that you can either bypass or fight and get to the next area. They become harder to deal with if you feed. But feeding is the only way to build up your vampiric powers to actually stand a chance of fighting the basic enemies.
Yes.
So there's a real balancing act there. And I don't know about you, but I found that in the very early stages almost off-putting, because the combat was a little bit clumsy, but everything I came across they were too difficult.
Well, the combat has pretensions to being almost Dark Souls, Bloodborne-esque, but it's not. No. It's nowhere near as good. It's nowhere near as smooth. The actual... There's not really any weight to your attacks, it doesn't feel like, except for the secondary attacks, like using the stake. Yeah. Things like that. And the dodge mechanic's quite good. But once I figured it out, like, fighting groups of enemies was never fun. No. But once I figured it out, it actually became rather easy. It was like, get in a couple of attacks, dodge out the way, wait for the enemy to finish their attack move, get a couple of attacks in, dodge out the way.
That was it. Once you got the pattern, and I think there's an element fairly early on which I think you'll probably have gone past, but it's in a sewer, and you come across a bit of a semi-boss, don't you?
Yeah.
And it was that one that. No, it wasn't. Sorry, I tell a lie. It was a semi-boss in a morgue.
Yes, I fought that one as well.
Yeah, and because that was a unique character almost, and a unique set of powers that you don't really come across again.
Yeah.
And it was very tricky, and I was getting extremely frustrated with that. And I ended up going back to bed to evolve, and I respec'd everything.
Yeah.
I took all my upgrades and I redistributed everything to give me a different loadout, which actually was quite a nice ability to go and do that. And then I went back, and yes, it was a dodge, and then a couple of particular attacks that are going to work well and what's going to take the most energy off.
Yeah.
And I got through it, and after that, things did get a little bit easier, especially as I leveled up. But it was, it was very frustrating early on, and it does get better as you learn, but it never really becomes a proper combat game. And especially, you've already mentioned the Dark Souls element, but also if you think the likes we've had with God of War this year, and just how things have moved on, it does feel a little bit clumsy and clunky, and it's not fluid enough. And also, and I don't know if you spotted this, but the enemies are much more fluid and don't have the cooldown times that you have to deal with.
Yep.
Which is a little bit unfair. You might be more powerful, but you can throw in one vampire attack.
But it appears to have that stamina bar.
That's it. They can just keep going, and they can interrupt your attacks more than you can interrupt theirs. And it's not. I suppose it's not unfair. It's just a little bit unbalanced.
It's not a particularly well-designed combat system. It's functional, the same as the one in Remember Me was. It gets the job done, but it's, to be honest, it's not. If that's what the game was about, I'd be very much down on it. But that's not what I'm enjoying about the game. To be honest, the combat, the exploration, and the quasi-investigations. When, for instance, when you're investigating a dead body that's in a morgue and it's just select from a number of options from a wheel, it's not anything more complicated than that. None of that stuff is that engaging. It's there to be gotten through. The stuff in this game that is really, really strong, and the stuff that's pulled me in and it got me quite hooked very quickly, is the stuff that Dontnod have already proven that they're very good at through the Life is Strange series, which is the narrative, the conversations, the interactions with the characters. Aside from some incredibly bad writing in places, some very awkward metaphors, especially right at the very beginning of the game. What is glass but tortured sand? Etc. That's the area that I've got sucked into the most. Like when I first got to is it Pembroke Hospital, which is like becomes your base. I spent hours just talking to everyone, exhausting every conversation option, trying to find out as much as I could about all of these characters, eavesdropping on them when the opportunity arose, and hunting around trying to find more information that would unlock more conversation paths, because the dialogue is great, the voice acting is outstanding.
Jonathan,
especially from Jonathan.
I thought he did it very well. He got that absolute. It is that tortured element to him. He is conflicted with what he's doing. It works well, and I do agree it stands out. There's that entire mechanic, and I liked the way you unlock other options through the hint mechanics, and also through healing people. And say, I think in some districts you'll talk to a father that will unlock options with his son. Because you can understand their relationship more and why they've moved to that area and why the son has to stay inside and the father's out, and it builds a really vivid picture of being able to do it. And even more interestingly is when you get to the key prominent people of a district and you're tackling them in the story. If you've done enough of that around the edges investigation to unlock the hints, you can unlock alternate ways of dealing with them. So you've not, in most cases, you're going to have an embrace, let go kind of option, and in most games you would. It would be one of two, wouldn't it? You kill them all, let them go. Decide what you're going to do. This offers you a third or fourth, depending on what you've done and whether you've unlocked it. And I only realised this, I think, with maybe the third or fourth district, when I got to it, and I thought, why is that one locked off? What have I missed? How have I not got that option open? And it chucked in there a remnant that went, a replay on this might be quite good,
especially if it's not particularly long. That I wouldn't mind. I'm playing through this game not non-violently, because you are forced into combat with the members of the Priwen group, whatever they're called.
Yeah, the Priwen, the weird.
Yeah. The vampire
That's basically
hunters,
what they are, isn't it? But it doesn't. Yeah, they're a bit of odd faction in London, but your main enemies.
There's them, and there's the Scowls, the sort of feral vampires that you find. So you're forced into combat with those, but I'm trying to play through the rest of the game non-violently. I don't want to feed on anyone. I want to see if you can get through the game without feeding on anyone.
Yes, you can.
But I wouldn't mind playing through it again and being a little bit more vampiric, shall we say.
I only fed on a couple of people. I did, and because I was thinking I'm going to take it for what it is and make my decisions as I went along. And very early, before you even get to Pembroke Hospital, is when you get off the boat and you have to go and visit the surgeon who's brought you to the hospital. And there's a guy you encounter on the docks, and he was such a dislikable character that I just went, "You're dead," and that was it. I let him off into the shadows and embraced him. And then a little bit later on, I was walking through a graveyard and found his grave and other bits and pieces, and had side quests locked off to me and things I couldn't do because I'd made a bit of a rash decision.
See, I let him go, and I've talked to him a few times since then, and he's been such a prick. I'd eaten him. So next time I play through, he's a dead man.
He's off.
Yeah. I mean, I'm only 6 hours or so into it, but I've been trying to, exhaust every dialogue option with all the characters, do all of their side quests, try and develop the area around the hospital before I move on to other areas. But so far, that's the aspect that's really pulled me in. It is the characters and the interaction between Jonathan and the characters, and they're all really interesting. Like, if you just take the hospital, you've got like the woman who claims she's a vampire, and you're not sure whether she is actually a vampire or whether she's just a little bit confused, shall we say. And there's the World War I veteran with the disfigured face, and lots of varied and interesting characters.
There's the son and his mother, the overbearing hypochondriac that I just wanted to embrace his mother and free him. But there are some really well-rounded characters in this, some really believable ones, and it keeps on coming. I'll give it its due all the way through. It delivers on some interesting characters, and they're not one-dimensional bite fodder. They are there to progress the story and maintain your interest. And you're right, it does that. There is a lot of dialogue. If you're not in the right kind of mood for it, it feels very slow. Because I did have a couple of nights playing it where it was quite late, long days, bit tired, and started nodding off. In them, and I had to stop it and come back to it. So if you're not in the right frame of mind, it's not going to work. But actually, when you put the time in and you're really absorbed in it, you kind of don't realise how long you're playing for.
It handles conversation and character building and world building, I'd say, better than some games that you would consider more traditional RPGs. Like, I'm playing through Skyrim again at the moment on the Switch, and every single character in that game is voiced by one of half a dozen voice actors, and none of them ever really have anything particularly interesting to say, and you don't really care about any of them, and they don't have, everything just feels a bit robotic. This feels like a real place with real people, with hopes and dreams and despairs, and I'm completely sucked in by that.
And the atmosphere, the detail in the surroundings. When you get to White, I'm sure it's Whitechapel. There's one of the characters putting flowers in plant pots outside a building, and you go over and look at them, and it's the detail around what they're actually doing there. It's incredible, even though it's quite condensed. I mean, when you look past the clunky aspects of the combat, just moving around the world's fine, but the atmosphere is fantastic, and quite a lot that's to do with the soundtrack. It's Olivier Derivière, I think I'm probably butchering that again, the guy who did the soundtrack for Remember Me, which was one of the most standout parts of that game, I thought. And the soundtrack to this is really good. I will say some of the pieces I've heard owe quite a lot in terms of influence to Bram Stoker's Dracula,
the film. But then there's like elements of like industrial music and things like that. It's a really, really interesting soundtrack, and it's not in quite a lot of games. The music's kind of just there. It's rare that you notice it. But I've noticed the music all the way through what I've played so far. It's been really good. This might be one that I seek out the soundtrack for.
It has a piece that plays each time you visit the Pembroke Hospital save room, for want of a better word, and that's the one that got stuck in my head, and not in a bad way, because it is a lovely little piece of music. That you know exactly where you are because of it. I really enjoyed the atmosphere it created. The only bit that does let it down is it does occasionally go off into that sewer dungeon trudge. And whilst the lovely detailed brickwork in the sewers, there's not a huge amount you can do with it. And for how nice it looks, and for how they've attempted to recreate the sort of the warrens running between districts. I found the map system extremely obtuse.
Yes, especially when you're trying to locate where a side quest is.
Yes,
and you have no idea how to get there.
That's it. It points you in a direction, and you can bring up your map, and you can follow your map, but the map doesn't have marked barriers or blockades or impassable areas, so you can spend a long time running down a particular area because he doesn't move that quickly. Even running, he's not fast, but you can spend a long time trying to get there and just getting frustrated by not having a decent navigation piece. It does get better because as you visited an area, you can unlock other ways back, and it feels cleaner towards the end. But I think before I went off to do the final mission, I did a bit of mopping up right the way around the map for some of the areas I hadn't been back to for quite a while, because that's an interesting thing it does. Characters that you've interacted with in some areas and then moved on, their stories still progress. Yeah. So things happen with them based on the health of the district, and you can go back and find out what's happened. So you've got consequences of your actions much later in the game as well, that you can choose to follow up or you can completely ignore. But running round at the end, it must have taken me, for the entire map, and it's not a big map, but it must have taken me an hour. Just because I kept getting lost, stuck, and thinking, why is that barrier there? But the map says it's clear. Yeah, it's not particularly well designed. It's easy to get lost. I've already, in the little time I've played, struggled to locate certain side quests because I'd head towards the pointer and then can't work out how to actually get there, and then find out that it's actually through several loading screens and then down under the level itself. I had one side quest which put 2 map markers up in completely opposite directions, and there was only one correct direction, and I didn't go to that one first. Well, that's helpful. Yeah, that was really, I couldn't understand why it was doing that. But it's kind of coming right back to what you said at the beginning. They make, and it is the type of game that is a solid 7 out of 10 because it does enough interesting things that you forgive a lot of the flaws. There have been, not many, but there have been vampire games before, or games that have tackled vampirism. But this, no one's ever made a game, as far as I know, that tries to tackle it in this particular way, with this sort of, moral conundrum that does the sort of things that it does in terms of tying being able to level up quickly to make your character more powerful to drinking, essentially having to kill off an NPC, but then forcing you to get to know that NPC before you get to the point where you can do that, so then you're less likely to want to do it, because even the unpleasant characters, there's something about them that you want to learn more about them, that you're not going to get that opportunity if you drain them, but you'll become more powerful. It does so many things right. The stuff it does wrong is just frustrating, but not frustrating enough to make me even consider stop playing it. I'm absolutely sucked in by the world, the setting, the atmosphere, the characters, the dialogue. It's just the stuff that the busy work that you have to do in between that isn't the best. That's all. I mean, this game would have been fantastic if it had maybe had. I don't know how big Dontnod are as a studio. I can't imagine they're particularly massive. They haven't been around for that long. If they'd had maybe a slightly bigger budget and more time to develop it, I mean, it's definitely a AA game. Yeah, it is, and I think it does. It does sort of the final finished quality kind of hints that they hit a point where they said, no, we have to ship it. We can't carry on making it. We can't carry on tweaking these things. It's in a playable state.
We're running out of money.
Yeah, and it is compared to some games that get released. There isn't a great deal wrong with it. I mean, we mentioned that the fog kind of comes in and out, and there's some other bits and pieces graphically but that's it's not nothing major.
No, that's the thing. There are slight graphical hitches. The combat doesn't feel as polished as it should be, and there's a few other little bits and pieces that probably could have taken a little bit more time to smooth out. There's no real technical issues. It's not crashed on me or anything like that. I haven't run into game-breaking bugs like I have in some Bethesda games. And I would rather play a game like this that tries to do something different and doesn't quite make it any day than a really, really polished game that doesn't do anything new.
Yeah, there's interesting, there's a slight digression, but this arrived the same day as Onrush for me, and so I have 2 games turning up, both of which attempt something quite different with almost an established genre.
Yep.
Onrush went in first, and I played a lot of hours in that. I really loved the way that was done.
Yeah.
But then I realised, nope, need to crack on with Vampyr, and I put that in. And, I then realised I had to play Vampyr, and I put that in. And it didn't come out until it was finished.
Yeah.
And even on those couple of slow nights where I was falling asleep, it didn't get switched off and taken out. It was put into rest mode, and I came back to it. And I didn't stop until I got to the end, which isn't a common occurrence for me. I would usually swap out to something else, and I've had a couple of games this year that have done that. God of War did it. I played it right through to the end. Far Cry 5 and Vampyr. They're the 3 this year story-driven games that I have not stopped until I've finished the main story.
Yeah.
And I did enjoy the outcome of this, and when you finished it, we'll have a chat about what ending you get, because I don't think it's a surprise, but there will be different endings depending on how you play, given the amount of choice. It'd be a bit of a jip if it didn't. Usually
on this show we would say whether or not we recommend this game to a lapsed gamer. There's nothing particularly about this game that would push me one way or the other, depending on whether it be suitable for a lapsed gamer. It is an open world action RPG, but it's not a particularly big open world. It doesn't sound like it's that long, really, but you would lose a lot of time just getting lost in the characters and the world, and so it could be quite a bit of a time sink, and it's not the sort of game that you can play in short bursts. But for what it is, it's a really, really interesting game that does some things differently, very differently, does some very interesting things, doesn't quite make it, but god damn it tries.
Yeah.
It's the plucky little game that tries.
It is the type of game that 2 generations ago I would have had absolutely no qualms about picking up. In fact, the type of game, the quality of game it is, was a staple weekend rent for those who ever remember being able to rent games from the non-existent video stores now. But me and whoever I was with at uni at that point would more than likely go and rent something like this and crack through it in a weekend, or over the course of a week, and would thoroughly enjoy it. And I did really enjoy it. I like the try-hards, because there's more passion and energy gone into it than just knocking out another blockbuster. And that's a bit unfair to some of the blockbusters, given the amount of work that goes into them, but you got the feel of what they've wanted to do.
There's a lot of work that goes into them, but there isn't an ounce of cynicism about this game. Like, this game was made by people who obviously cared about this project. And it shows. It's a cracking
that's
game.
it, isn't it? It's not just a job to these people. They've not come in to just draw a few assets and write some code. They've helped develop it and shape it.
Yeah, and you can see that by the type of games they make, because they're not, online multiplayer games as a service sort of thing. They make interesting single-player, narrative-led games that try and do something different, despite the fact that they've never quite managed to get it all the way there with any of their games. I salute Dontnod for trying.
Yeah.
Because Far too many studios these days just don't try.
No, absolutely. For that reason, anything that they do has my interest straight away. And they're usually a no-brainer. I am going to play that.
Yeah, I'm always on the lookout to see what they're doing next.
It's easy for you to say, Doctor. These people cannot go to the police, nor to the hospital. They don't even speak English. They depend on me for everything.
So, the end justifies the means. Is that your defense?
I know you're kind, Doctor. Just another fine-heeled, silver-spooned gentleman who was given the world on a platter. You know nothing of poverty. Nothing of the shame, the hunger, the loneliness.
You've convinced me of the sincerity of your actions and their noble justifications. But all the same, blackmail is a crime, and it will stop, Nurse Crane.
So, are you going to turn me over to the authorities?
Listen very carefully, Dorothy. You will erase from your memory everything you pretend to know about Lady Ashbury and Pembroke Hospital.
Let that rich bitch off the hook over my dead
Nurse
body.
Crane, enough. Listen as if your life depended on every word. I know you've a generous heart who gives freely to those in need, but you shall walk away from the shadier streets of your business.
I will never abandon...
Dorothy, the discussion has come to a close. Your clandestine activities in the Resistance are over. Let it go.
I'll let it go. Yes. All gone.
Thanks for joining me today, Matt. Where can people find you online?
You can find us usually on Twitter at Codec Moments or at codecmoments.com or on Facebook under Codec Moments. There's a bit of a theme running here. Just Google Codec Moments. We'll be there somewhere. But no, thanks for asking me to come and talk about it.
Very happy for you to come and join me. You're the first person to complete a podcast duo that I've had on here. I've had one half of Joypads for Goalpost, one half of Last Save Loaded. Now both halves of Codec Moments.
Oh, excellent. Do we get like a free beer or something for that?
You get a couple of stamps on a piece of card.
Oh, how many do we have to do before the bonuses kick in?
It's like 12, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. We'll have to get those in before EGX.
And then you get free, I'll get a free pint at EGX. Well, that's it for this episode. If you enjoyed the video, then please do hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a comment with your thoughts on Vampyr down below. As always, you can find us on Twitter at Lapsed Gamer. You can listen to the Lapsed Gamer Radio podcast on iTunes, Podbean and Spotify. And you can email us. The address is lapsedgamerradio@gmail.com. And you can always visit our blog at lapsedgamer.com. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next episode of LGR Play. Goodbye.
Goodbye.